Hi there, you're listening to the Estranged Heart podcast, and I'm your host, Kreed Revere. Welcome back to our returning listeners, and if this is your first time here, thank you for selecting this podcast to listen to. As we begin today's episode, I invite you to grab a cup of coffee or tea, settle in, and listen with an open heart. But first, the regular disclaimer. I am not a licensed therapist or counselor. Nothing within this podcast should be considered or taken as therapy. If you are in need of therapeutic support such as counseling, please seek out a therapist near you. Hi there. Before we begin today's anniversary episode, I have a few announcements and reminders. First of all, thank you for the wonderful feedback regarding the 2023 Moving Beyond Family Struggles Summit. The feedback has been excellent. Everyone that I've talked to had thoroughly enjoyed the summit, the totality of the summit, all 4 days. Those who purchased the recordings have been slowly going through those. And it was a great 4 days, lots of knowledge and information that was shared. And I know the feedback I've received from estranged and reconciled folks has been was great. Everyone's appreciated the time and effort that went into planning and preparing and presenting the summit. So thank you. Applications for the estranged parent and estranged adult child discussion group will be open again in November. We are wanting to add to this group. And as a reminder, it is for estranged parents and estranged adult children from separate families. And there is an application process. If you're interested in that, please email me at theestrangedheart@gmail.com. Currently, we have, I believe, a couple of more estranged adult children than we do estranged parents. And the group is very small and intimate at this point in time, so we're looking forward to its growth. There will be a validation workshop that I will be hosting on Saturday, November the 11th. If you're interested in attending this workshop, please email me at theestrangedheart@gmail.com. This is the third workshop for validation that I will be presenting. It's a workshop that everyone leaves with thinking, oh my gosh, this is information I never knew, never had before. And so if you're interested in attending this workshop, please let me know as soon as possible. Seats are limited. I keep these workshops small and intimate. There's not 20 or 30 people attending these workshops. Usually it's around 10 or so. And we generally have great discussion, and there's some coaching that happens in these webinars and workshops. And so again, if you're interested, just shoot me an email and I'm happy to give you the registration information. As a reminder, AC and I are offering joint coaching and consultations for those who might be interested in speaking with both formerly and now reconciled mom and adult child for insight and or guidance. If you're interested in scheduling a joint session with both AC and myself, or with just me, or with just AC, please shoot me an email, theestrangedheart@gmail.com. And finally, we are closing out season 2 with this episode, and entering season 3 next week. Happy birthday to the Estranged Heart, 2 years on October the 31st. And so we have a lot of new things coming for season 3, which means there will be changes, right? And changes can be anxiety provoking, difficult to navigate through. But if there's one thing that I could convey to you, is that the heart of the show will remain, right? I think it's indicative of all relationships. We all grow or should be growing and evolving and changing. And I hope that you'll be along for the ride for year 3 with the Estranged Heart. So with that being said, on to the anniversary episode. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining AC and I again for another episode of the Estranged Heart. And this is the Wow, the ending of season two, the last episode of season two. So, yeah, the first episode of The Estranged Heart aired on October 31st of 2021. So, happy almost birthday to The Estranged Heart.
Yay.
Yeah. Who thought I'd be here? 2 years later, I did not think in the beginning of this podcast that it would, I had no idea that I'd be sitting here 2 years later recording an episode. So this has been a journey, quite the journey, in a myriad of ways, for me personally and professionally and everything in between. So, um, and I have to say, AC, that you and I met January of 2021. The Estranged Heart podcast began the end of October of 2021. So I'd like to say that I think that having crossed your path the beginning of that year helped kickstart The Estranged Heart. So thank you, my friend.
No, thank you. I mean, when we first crossed paths, I was co-hosting another show, and that show had primarily dealt with estranged adult children, and I'd been so sick of that, and I thought I got to talk to an estranged parent, and I think I searched on hashtag estrangement on Facebook or Twitter or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
came across your name, send you a message, and even talking to you at that time, I mean, you're talking about how I didn't think I'd be sitting here at the second anniversary of the show recording an episode. It never even occurred to me that you would record one episode of the show. I just thought, okay, here's this mom. She's got this army of moms that she's supporting on her social
Mm-hmm.
media group. She's got a story to tell. What a cool person. She's honest. She's insightful. She's willing to accept her shortcomings, all this kind of stuff. And maybe I should have thought, well, I see podcasting potential here, but I was so wrapped up in the moment of finally getting to talk to an estranged mom that I somehow missed that. So bad on me, good on you, and congratulations on 2 years. That's nothing short of amazing.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's been a process. It's been a journey, right? You make that decision, having talked to you in the beginning of 2021, and what I took from that meeting and that episode for that podcast, I like to think was the fertile ground that started the thought process for The Estranged Heart. So it was always something I wanted to do, to explore some sort of podcast. I had no idea what it would take, what it would involve, what would I talk about, who would listen, all of those things. And then it just all kind of coalesced that year. I remember I had a friend who said, "You should start a podcast." And I thought, what? Me? Like, what, me? What would I talk about? Who would listen to me talk? And this podcast has grown by leaps and bounds. The first I remember the goal for the first year was 25,000 downloads. That was the goal I wanted, and I surpassed that in my first year. And then the second year, we doubled, more than doubled, um, the first year's progress. So I'd like to think that that was an accomplishment of mine, and I'm pretty proud of that. It takes a lot to record an episode weekly for 52 weeks a year, right? With few exceptions. That's exactly what's happened here.
What's the thing? I mean, it's not just as simple as sitting down and talking while you record. I don't think people realize that there's the hours and hours of prep work that goes into thinking about things, organizing
Yes.
thoughts, processing feelings around the subject matter that maybe we're not super comfortable with sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
It can be, I mean, obviously in the grand scheme of things, a healing process,
Mm-hmm.
but in the moment it can be a devastating process as well, an exhausting one. And the fact that you were able to commit to it by yourself for so long, again, I mean, I hope everybody who's listened to you through all that time can truly appreciate that this wasn't just you coming to them 30 to 45 minutes per week. This was you dedicating hours and hours of your time, dedicating your energy, your emotions. Probably there were weeks when you were sacrificing your well-being to make sure something came out. I mean,
Yeah.
I've been in this game long enough to know how it works. People don't always understand the behind the scenes stuff, and well, hey, maybe I'm giving them a bit of a peek behind the curtain because I
Hmm.
think they really need it so that they can fully appreciate that it's just not that you're trying to establish some sort of celebrity status here and build yourself up, that
Correct.
you are building them up and using your own well-being sometimes as a foundation for that. So on behalf of the audience of which I was a part and continue to be a
Hmm.
part,
Hmm.
thank you for 2 years of dedication when you had life to live as well. Thank you so much.
Mm. Thanks. That means a lot, and you're right. There's a lot of work that goes into this, a lot of prep, a lot of thinking, a lot of processing. And this is, I mean, the topic that the Estranged Heart covers is an emotional topic in and of itself. So all of those emotions come up almost on a weekly basis, right? Every time we sit down to record, every time I sat down to record, it was something that touched home in some form or fashion. And that can take its toll, right? It can also energize, it can do, all sorts of different emotions come up in that process. So it's been amazing to watch the growth of the show and the reach of the show. I think it's interesting. Um, when the show first started, it was um, mainly parents who listened to it. And if memory serves me correct, I think that there were a couple of estranged adult kids who said, "I'm not listening to that show." An estranged mom talks on that show, and what they were not about to give me the time of day, and that reach now has gone to the kids. And so now it's a show that reaches estranged parents and estranged adult children. And I even have received contact from folks who are estranged from siblings, from aunts, uncles, cousins, etc. So it's kind of morphed into a show that covers all sorts of estrangements, right? I think the only topic I haven't really delved into on this show are friendships that are estranged, or things, platonic relationships like that. So um, it's been interesting. It's been interesting to watch the growth of the show and the folks that reach out and things like that.
Well, I think growing into that more, I hate to say generalized realm of estrangement because I mean
Hmm.
it makes it sound like it's more generic when it's not. I think the only way to take an honest look at any type of estrangement is to look at that ripple effect, look at the family and
Right.
friendship environment that the estrangement is born out of. And what I've found is that when you talk to somebody who is estranged from a parent, whether or not they realize it, they are almost always estranged from actively or have had experience with being estranged from other types of relationships in their lives as well, whether it be
Hmm.
children, siblings, like you say, aunts, uncles, grandparents. It has become such a normal theme in their family that it's become invisible.
Right.
So growing away from, well, I mean, it's not really like you're growing away from the moms. I don't think. I think it's just a case of you're in a better position to support them if you're supporting like all the other types of players in these situations too.
Hmm.
And I hope that anybody who's feeling like maybe you're betraying their loyalty by also seeing the other side of things, that like, hey, this may appear on the surface to be an act of betrayal, but it's actually an act of loyalty and support, because I can't honestly and effectively support you if I'm ignoring the things that are hurting you.
Mm. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for saying that. because that's exactly how I feel. I cannot stand in my integrity and look only one way. It's impossible for me to do. I don't want to do it, and I don't think that it's helpful. Um, when I was able to expand my view on estrangement when I was going through it to include the perspective of my children, that's when things began to shift and change, right? And I think that in healing, that change is needed. If we stay stagnant and stuck in one particular place, um, not to say that healing can't happen, but growth doesn't generally happen. And I would really love to see the growth of relationships and healthy relationships. And so in order to do that, I have to be able to see all perspectives. How did we get here? There's a quote that talks about at some point we have to stop pulling people from the river and we need to go up the river and find out why they're falling in.
Oh yeah.
And that kind of describes the work that I do, right? I'm happy to work with parents to help them to come out of estrangement. So in essence, pulling you out of the river. I'm happy to do that. But I cannot stand by and continue to just pull people out of the river. I want to go up and find out why they're falling in.
Mm-hmm.
Why are we even in estrangement to begin with? What is the root of this? And how do we stop that so that we can then have healthy relationships and we don't even have to get to the point where somebody needs to pull you out of the river?
Yeah, I love that analytical approach because I mean, I spent the majority of my career obviously doing different types of things, but it was in a sense every career is the same thing. You're going to have problems that come up. You need to figure out what the problems are and you need to solve them.
Right.
And while there is a season for band-aid fixes, like if your fence
Mm-hmm.
is tipping over, maybe you want to prop it up so that the next big wind doesn't knock it all the way flat. But at some point, that broken post has to be repaired.
Right.
And I
Yeah.
think I feel like we're at a crossroads here where we've been propping up the fence for a while.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's time to start digging out some of those bad posts.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. How else are we going to do this, right? We can only put band-aids on the spurting wound so many times before we've run out of band-aids, and here we are with, the wound is still spurting blood everywhere, and we need to have a surgeon go in and do some work, right?
Mm-hmm.
To be able to repair this and figure out how did it happen in the first place? How did we get here?
Yeah.
So yeah, so then here we are, the end of season 2. You came on board as a guest co-host in the summer of this year.
Tried to be a
And
guest. Yeah.
yeah. uh, and that was what, about 3/4 of the way into the second season. And now here we sit with you as a permanent co-host of the Estranged Heart. And I am so grateful to have support in doing this, keeping this thing going. Thank you for showing up when I needed support and assistance in this, and for contributing in ways that I can't contribute. You bring something totally different to this show, and I'm appreciative of that. So thanks for being here.
No, I mean, I appreciate you in a way pulling me out of the river too. And you not just pulled me out of the river, but what people don't see behind the scenes is how you not only pulled me out and dried me off, but you walked me back up the river to show me where I slipped in so I could avoid that sort
Mm,
of thing happening again. And it's been personally rewarding for me, not just coming in as a co-host of this show, which in and of itself has been just amazing. The types of people I've had a chance to interact with as a result, but also inspiring me to not just pick up where I had left off with my own podcast, but also to kind of revamp it a little bit too, change things up, make sure that it was a better fit both for me and the audience. And what I'm seeing for me on both fronts is a lot of personal growth. And I mean, I don't know the behind the scenes yet for the Estranged Heart, but I mean, I'm seeing on In the Blood, I'm seeing some more growth. I feel like the feedback for me now, I get emails from listeners of both shows
Mm-hmm.
that seem to be pretty excited about what you and I are both doing as individuals, but also as a collective. Just
Right.
all around, I feel like everything's moving in good directions since this failed attempt at a one night stand with you here to be a guest on the show.
That's great.
Yeah, I thought it was going to be one of those one and done things, but
Yeah.
here we are in this like weird
Yeah.
marriage of sorts. So you
Right.
know,
Yeah, that's
I'm
great.
happy to be here, and I'm happy to have been offered the opportunity to be here.
Yeah. It's I just have to giggle at that. That's great. It is. We do have a marriage of sorts, and it's been interesting. It's been fun to watch this relationship grow. Both our personal friendship as well as our relationship as far as co-host for the Estranged Heart. And I'm excited to see where this goes, right? And what growth we will have together. Again, as a personal friendship and for this podcast. So speaking of that, when you came on board, that brought about a fairly significant change for this podcast, right?
Yeah.
Folks were used to listening to just me, solo me, and now there's a conversation between you and I, and a conversation with, here I am, formerly estranged mom and adult child, you formerly adult child. And it adds a whole new dimension to this podcast. And I'm sure that for some folks, that's been a little taken some getting used to, right? Folks that were used to just listening to me, and now there's someone else on board here. How do you think that what can we do to help support folks to kind of maneuver through change?
What I like to make sure that I bring up, what if I'm talking to somebody who's concerned that change is overwhelming,
Mm-hmm.
that is, I mean, I struggle with it too. I don't want to like sound like I'm an authority and an outsider. I'm unaffected because I'm certainly affected. I've often said I fear change.
Mm,
This isn't necessarily true. Just basically what I'm saying is, yeah, I don't like it. It's uncomfortable.
right.
Because as people, I think that part of our survival instinct is to familiarize ourselves with our surroundings, to educate ourselves where we can anticipate what's coming next, which is why I think in some ways we're resistant to change as
Mm-hmm.
much as it's absolutely necessary for us. Our
Right.
heads are able to easily wrap themselves around the idea that change is often good,
Mm-hmm.
but the rest of us, our heart, our spirit, our soul, whatever you want to call it, not so much. Those parts of us don't like things. But change is rarely the kind of thing where it just you wipe the slate completely clean and start writing a new story. Change is usually it just the next chapter of the same
Mm-hmm.
story, right? And if you want to look in
Right.
terms of this podcast, there I'm sure are people who are thinking, like, F this guy, he's just getting in the way of my Kreed fix this week. I like listening to Kreed talking by herself. I'm a mom. This is what I come here for. I don't come here to hear the two of you guys having a conversation, as productive as it might be. Hey, it's not for me. And to a person like that, if they were coming to me with a concern, I'd say, look, Kreed is still here. They're still going to be like, I would reassure them that there are still these episodes that are just Kreed. There's still those parts of the Estranged Heart that are exactly what brought you here to begin with.
Right.
Every situation in life is like that. There are going to be the certain elements that are steady. They're non-negotiable. They will always be there, but there's always going to be these other things that are coming in too. And like it or not, this is part of the process is going to happen. So I like to encourage people to, obviously like take comfort in the things that have stayed the same. Use those
Right.
as something to hang on to, like an anchor,
Mm-hmm.
while you also are sort of dabbling in the new things that might be kind of uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Learn to gain an appreciation. Like if I think about some of my favorite songs, my favorite albums, I didn't like them the first couple times I heard them.
Right.
And it wasn't like I necessarily forced myself to like, oh, I'm gonna develop a taste for this. Things sneak up on us. Everything that we
Mm-hmm.
take for granted as being part of our normal everyday at some point in the past was a frightening change.
Right.
We got through it then. And if we look back on all the things we didn't want to deal with that we're now happy to deal with, I think it's reasonable to expect that what we don't want to deal with today is going to turn into one of those things tomorrow as well.
Oh, I love that. Yes. Yes. The heart of the estranged heart will always remain as long as I'm a part of this show. That will always be a part of the work here. And when I say the work, and all the things that we talk about, the conversations that we have, um, are heartfelt. I know that you and I both come at this from a heart perspective,
Mm-hmm.
even if at times that may not sound necessarily like that, but that is our intent. We're never, we don't stray very far from that heart piece. And so I want to assure listeners that that part will remain the same. Yes, there are things that will be changing as we move through and move into into season 3. But I hope that people can embrace that change in much the same way that we need to embrace change with our relationships,
Yeah.
right? Um, I think if anything, a thing that I want to get stress, I guess, more so with today's episode is that this podcast has evolved just like any relationship that we have. You have been the listeners, you have been in relationship with the estranged heart. And as with any relationship, parts and pieces of it will change over time, will evolve, will grow. You have grown as listeners. The podcast has grown. The content has changed, evolved. Therefore, the podcast will change and evolve, and therefore your relationship with the podcast will change and evolve. I'm hoping, I think one of, if I were to give out a, what's my wish in the middle of this change is that you will embrace this along with a maybe this particular episode isn't for me, but I'm going to come back tomorrow or next week and continue to explore and see where they go with this, right? There's, if we get to it, it's kind of like tossing the baby out with the bathwater, right? Oh,
Mm-hmm.
I don't like this episode, so I'm going to toss the whole thing away. Or right, that type of thing where we don't know where the nuggets are going to come in at. And I hope that folks, especially those who've been listening for a long time, can reflect back over the past 2 years and see where there were, maybe not so in every episode, but in many episodes there were little nuggets of wisdom or little nuggets of gold that they took away from that. Even when they, because I know that I've gotten comments from listeners who have said, I listened to, last week's episode and I got 3/4 of the way through and I thought, wow, this really didn't really do much for me this week. And then at the very end, you said such and such that just blew my mind, right? That kind of thing. That is what I'm hoping that folks will continue to, if you by chance have said, I would prefer to just listen to Kreed along the way, that you will continue to listen and look for and harvest the seeds that are planted with both AC and I on board here now. So change is inevitable. The world changes. We can't have it as it was in 1997 because we're here in 2023. And by default, our relationships change. And I would love to see us be in relationships differently between parents and adult children. And I think that that's the bulk of my work here in the world of estrangement, is to help those relationships to evolve and to change.
I like the way that you've been comparing the changes in the podcast to changes in relationship, changes in life, because a big part of other relationships, right? Not just a relationship with the podcast, is feeding back to the other party. And if you want to look at this podcast as something that you have a relationship with, if there's something going on that for whatever reason is rubbing you the wrong way, it's rubbing you the right way, you've got questions, concerns, anything like that, as a podcaster, I can't stress enough like the value of listener feedback. Listeners don't always realize it's not like when you're watching TV or a movie and you're screaming at the screen and nobody hears you. You've got a direct line to Creed and I.
Right.
If there's something you want to hear more or less of, I can't promise to make your wish come true, but I can promise that her and I will have an honest and difficult conversation about it if needs be, because we want to make sure that you all are served. Otherwise, what are we doing here? We're not here to hear our own voices.
Right.
There's weeks when we're tired and maybe not in the mood, but we also know that there's a lot of people that count on us, and we want to be here for you. And if we're here for you, if we're doing the wrong work, it doesn't matter how hard we work. It's not going to land the way we want it to, the way you want it to.
Right.
So let us know what's going on, and let's all navigate these changes and in a way where we can all grow together.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, yeah, feedback, please. We welcome that. How in the context of relationships, if you're not and I'm talking before estrangement, if you're not giving feedback and helping the other person to understand what's working for you and what's not working for you, etc., without the expectation that this person change to accommodate all of your wishes. But what are we doing when we're in relationship with one another if we're not providing that? So feedback is always welcomed. Please feel free to reach out to either one of us, both of us, and help us to know what you're looking for, what you appreciate, what you found helpful, what you find not helpful, etc. And we can learn and grow and evolve from that as well. So AC, and talking about moving into season 3, you and I've talked about some changes that we want to kind of let the listeners know about, so everyone can kind of sit with that and know what to expect. I think oftentimes when we can have a heads up, it prepares us, and we can settle more easily into change rather than when it is a surprise. So you and I've talked about having more structure to
Yeah.
our shows. I know that for some people, our freestyle way of having conversations works really well for them, and I know I enjoy them.
We won't be abandoning that entirely.
Correct. Correct. We also want to bring in some more structure and having more of a focused topics that we cover in episodes. So for those who have listened since AC came on board, we're really good at conversations, and those tend to
move in directions that lead us down the rabbit hole, so to speak. We kind of run from one thing to the next because that's that has to happen when we're talking about estrangement. It generally, there's this cause and then that cause, and when we're just moving along with the conversation as things come up with that. And I think for season 3, we want to have some episodes that are a little more structured where we're having one topic that we're covering. Any thoughts on that, AC?
What I like about taking this approach where we, again, not to move entirely away from chasing down rabbit holes, because
Right.
we surprise ourselves sometimes with some great
Mm-hmm.
content, great topics when we do that, but we also miss out on certain things, which is why what I like about the idea of a little bit more structure, sticking to a topic,
Mm-hmm.
even if we feel like the conversation wants to pull us away from that one topic, if we park there a little bit better and stay more focused on that one thing, we can address it, I think, in, well, obviously in a more complete way.
Mm-hmm.
Part of that complete approach is it ties into some piece of listener feedback that I've gotten through, like, one of the people I speak to on a regular basis through this show, and what they had shared was that they at times find it a little frustrating because it seems like the approaches or the solutions that we present to certain types of situation, it seems more like a one size fits all kind of thing, which isn't always realistic.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree with that to a degree. There are some things where, I mean, there is an objective right or wrong to the approach,
Mm-hmm.
but there are also little tweaks that need to happen with individual situations. Now, when we're speaking kind of like casually in generalized terms in a conversation on this show, we're forced to present things in a way that will appeal to the greatest amount of people. We can't address every exception to every rule.
Right.
Whereas if we're more focused on talking about one issue today, like say we're talking about, I don't know, communication,
Mm-hmm.
or more to the point, appropriate forms of communication.
Mm-hmm.
If we're parking on that one topic, we can say, look, like generally speaking, these are appropriate forms, these are appropriate times to communicate. However,
Right.
if such and such is happening, this rule may not apply.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we can get a little bit more into that, which I think better serves everybody else in their own personal journey through this ugly thing that is estrangement. We can, I mean, for anybody who again wants to hear stories of Kreed and her early estrangement struggles, they want to hear the heart of a mom. I mean, man, there's a lot of back episodes.
Mm-hmm.
There's no rule
Right.
that says you can't listen to things over and over again.
Right.
But for the things moving forward, I mean, like, I think both of us, we're moving forward. We've got difficulties. I mean, there's things that change beginning of estrangement versus even post reconciliation. We can't adequately address these things while we're bouncing all over the place. We kind of have to at some point bring things into focus and say, okay, this is what we're talking about today. Today's topic isn't maybe the most emotional thing, but sometimes the most functional things, they do move away from that emotional component a little bit. I feel like I've been talking way too much. I got to dial myself back here.
No, you're right. You're right. I think just yes, it's hard when you're going down the rabbit hole. You're covering a lot of different things in a very short period of time, and by default, we cannot expand on all the things, right? And this is, I mean, my gosh, this is one of the things that I talk about so often with my coaching clients is, and this is the value of coaching, is that we can then dial down on things, right? In the podcast, we were not able to cover all, as AC has said, we cannot possibly cover all the what ifs and wherefores for each and every type of estrangement. Every family is different. Every estrangement has, while it has common threads and themes, involved for the most part, they're all different. And so we're hoping that by focusing in and having more structured episodes on occasion, that we can dial down and reach more of those folks who say, well, this generalization doesn't apply to me. Would that sum it up?
Yeah, I wish I'd used that few words to make that point. Yeah.
That's great. Oh my gosh. Well, in the end, this is where we're at. We have this continues to be the goal of the Estranged Heart, is to keep the heart in play here. We don't ever want to lose that. We also want to continue for the goal here to be that the Estranged Heart is a resource for you. It's something you can tap into. There's almost 100 episodes. There's lots of material here for people who want something more, something deeper. And if you happen to come across a previous episode and you want us to expand on that in one of our more structured episodes, let us know. Let us know what you're wanting more information about. And we're happy to try to dial that down so that we can get some deeper things covered and covered more extensively. So, anything else that you'd like to add for today's episode?
I just want to like add one little bit to that last point you made.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody listens to a past episode and finds something that they would like us to expand upon, it's not an intrusion to offer that request or that insight. You're not being pushy if you do that. It actually helps us produce this show in a way that is the most beneficial. If you tell us specifically, hey, I was listening back on episode 35, you mentioned something, I wish you had gone into more depth. Don't just sit there silently wishing. Send an email.
Right.
That's the kind of thing I can guarantee, maybe not immediately that it will happen, but it certainly will happen.
Yes, absolutely.
If you need
Agreed.
a more immediate response, well, then you can email Kreed to book a coaching session with one or both of us,
Right.
and we can immediately address you there.
Yeah.
But anyways, after rambling on way too much, is answering your simple question, is there anything else I would like to add? There is one thing I would like to add if we are at the end.
Yes.
Because we've been speaking a lot about change, and all this talk of change reminded me of a quote from my favorite movie / book, which is the Bridges of Madison County. And the quote is, things change. They always do. It is one of the things of nature. Most people are afraid of it, but if you look at it as something you can always count on, then it can be a comfort.
Beautiful. Thank you for helping me to continue on with the Estranged Heart and changing it and growing it and evolving it. I'm super grateful for you. I'm super grateful for every listener, every person who has reached out and expressed an opinion, a thought, a suggestion regarding this show. I am humbled and honored to be here doing this and being in it with you all. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you, AC.
No, and thank you, Kreed, and also thank you to the listeners for welcoming me into the Estranged Heart family. Yes. I know I am not for everyone, and even the people who may not super duper love me, you guys have welcomed me in too, and you're giving me a chance, and that means a lot to me. So all of us that are involved with this show, hosts, listeners, guests, we all know what it's like to feel the sting and rejection that comes along with living in estrangement, and being welcomed in here has certainly lessened some of that sting of rejection for me. And just being invited on here and having people listen to my voice on this platform week in and week out Oh my God, it's just been so good. So thank you to everybody, and most especially thank you to you, Kreed, for not allowing this to end at being a guest co-host, allowing me to come in at this point and also to move forward with you. This is just wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, you're so welcome. Thank you. Thanks to everyone. Everyone. I am so grateful. I'm grateful. I don't know how else to say it. Thank you seems so small, but really, from the bottom of my heart, thanks for being a part of this journey with me. Take care, everyone.
This brings this episode to a close. I hope that this time together was time you feel well spent, and that you are able to find some takeaway nuggets to help you on your journey, wherever you may be on your estrangement and reconciliation path. If you feel you've received something helpful or positive from this podcast, please consider following us, sharing this podcast with others, leaving a positive review, perhaps entertaining becoming a guest on our show, or following us on social media, on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok under the same name, The Estranged Heart. As a reminder, there is an online support group on Facebook. If you are a estranged mom who identifies as being spiritual and approaches estrangement with a sense of curiosity rather than blame and judgment, and desire to do inner self-work and reflection, please seek us out. We can be found at facebook.com/Estranged Mothers Support Group. And lastly, if you are an estranged parent or an estranged adult child and would like to have your story shared on the podcast, anonymously or not, please reach out to me via email at theestrangedheart@gmail.com.